We're here today talking with Alan Gedde about his book, Unless the Lord, a book about trusting the Lord through Psalms 127. Alan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I think it's probably exciting for you too because you're getting to talk about it. It's coming out now as an audiobook, but tell us just a little bit about the book and kind of an overview, if you would.
Yeah, so unless the Lord, it's pretty funny. It's my wife and I's basically our life biblical passage, the way we've lived our life since we were married. And of course, I fell in love with it because the passage is Psalm 127, and you can go look it up. I'm not going to talk about it and tell you the whole thing here, but the idea of it is in the middle. It says, "Happy is the man whose quiver is full of arrows, which are children." And I'm like, I love to hunt, and so it just made perfect sense. And I hunt a lot, and so what I wanted to do was I took this passage and I sort of put my life into it, but then I added all these different hunting stories and biblical stories that would sort of enhance how this verse can be a life passage for all of us.
So, what kind of taking us back to when you wrote this book and the inspiration? Was there a moment in time where it kind of just clicked? You talked about it being your life verse, but was there a moment, a specific moment you can look back on to being inspired, or was it more of just a process over time?
I would say it was a process over time. I just I loved the passage, and then my kids started making these crafts for me, and I have 6 children, so I clearly lived this passage out. Like, I made sure my quiver was full, and we had these homemade Christmases, and so the kids would go and they would paint these elaborate like arrows, and they would do other things. They would write Psalm 127, Psalm 127. So I started putting that all over my office. And as I said, I have always hunted, and I've always wondered, because one of the things you struggle with or that I struggle with as a Christian and almost a pacifist when it comes to war, but I love this idea of hunting and being in the wild and sneaking around the woods. And I thought, how do I mesh those two? It doesn't seem to work. But then it hit me. I'm like, this psalm talks about it. Clearly, God wants us to be warriors. And warriors have to hunt, gather, all of those things. So it fit. And then I started looking at other verses in the Bible and other passages and other stories in the Bible where you could see these were warriors. These were people who God had called to do something great. And I thought, warriors, again, if we're warriors, this is who we are. So I started realizing I could do something with this. I have so many stories in my vault that I could share with people. And this is part of how many books are there that talk about a guy who hunts, loves Jesus, and can put it in a biblical term. And I thought, there we go. This is what I want to do. And my wife was so like, you got to do this. This is what you must do. And so I did.
And so here we are, and now I mentioned earlier it's being released through Audible as an audio book, audio version, which means you can listen on the go. Just so many different ways to consume it. 3 different formats of the book. But I wanted to ask you, how did you go about picking the narrator, and what was that like for you? And did you kind of have a voice in your mind before? Because I know they send 3 different options, but what was that like?
So yeah, that was kind of fun because initially when I first started thinking about doing audio, I had all these people around me. I go to a church and there's audio people at the church, and we can do it. We can do it in my studio. We can do this and we can do that. I'm like, I just don't have that amount of time. And I wanted somebody who had a similar voice to mine, who wasn't going to read my book. I don't read. I'm a children's pastor. So everything I do, I tell stories. I just want to tell a story. I just want to be like, I want to tell you this story. It's a great story. I want you to hear it. So they sent me the 3 voices, and you had your standard audio guy who didn't tell a story. He was just reading the book. Then you had a guy who had a little inflection. And then the third guy, and wow, like he told the story. You could almost see his face as he was reading it, like his eyebrows go up. He even had a little laughter. I said, that's what I want. I want somebody to tell the stories in this book, so that people will listen. And that's how I ended up on my narrator.
Yeah, and I think that's what a great narrator does is tells the story and makes it come to life, just stirs our imagination, and so it's a
Yeah.
great way to consume a book. And again, unless the Lord, a book about trusting the Lord through Psalm 127. We've talked about it being available on audiobook, also available as a paperback ebook. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Barnes and Noble. If you want the audio version, got an Audible membership, or you can find it there. Amazon, the Books app on iTunes, even available as an ebook or audio version. But before we end, Alan, I just wanted to ask you anything else you want to share with our audience before we go?
Well, yeah, just I know I talked about hunting, and it definitely does lean into that. So uh, maybe as I think about people that are looking for books, they're always looking for like self-help books or something fun. This book has it all. It will talk about how you can live your life in a way that could absolutely rearrange and change it, but it will also give you some fun stories. I mean, I love reading my book, and I've read it so many times at this point that you would think I'd start hating it, but I don't. I love it. I love reading it because they're my stories. It's me on paper, and nobody knows me, but after they read this book, they're gonna have a pretty good idea who Alan Gedde is.
Well, Alan, thank you for taking time and just sharing a little bit with us today, spending a little bit of time with us.
Thanks a lot for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, have a great day.
You too.